the network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AV Nation.
This is AV Nation.
Hello everybody, it's time for another episode of The Lighting Guy here on AV Nation. Welcome to another edition of The Lighting Guy Show. I am your host, James J.P. Bedell. This is the show is done in collaboration with AV Nation TV. It's about lighting design, and collaboration and technology. Today's episode is going to be about the crossroads between lighting quality and energy efficiency. I have to give credit right off the top of the bat to Kevin Willmorth, who wrote a great piece in Architectural SSL magazine. The piece it's a must-read. We're going to post the link in the show notes. But basically, the thrust of the piece, and I'm just pulling up a piece of slideshow here so we can talk about it. But the essence of the piece is, here we are. The difference between, or the crossroads between lighting quality and energy efficiency. This, I think, was a big issue in the early goings of LED. When LED first came to market, people saw the efficiency of it, but not necessarily the lighting quality. The color consistency wasn't there, color quality wasn't there, consistency between pieces wasn't there. But Kevin writes in his piece, the idea that energy use and lighting quality are forces that must be balanced presupposes that light quality is in opposition to energy efficiency. This is illogical. It's a fallacy. That's sort of the basic premise of what I want to talk about tonight. The idea that you either design nice lighting or you save energy is now just it's a concept that's dated. Where I want to push us here is, this is the old way of thinking about lighting design versus the quality of light. The market wants new things to sell. LED provides lumens per watt, consistently lower cost, digital control, these sort of selling points. But the design community has traditionally always wanted quality of light, so beautiful color, consistent performance, glare control, beam shaping, durability. So, among dozens of other things that make a light source high quality. What I would say is that we're no longer in a place where you necessarily have to compromise if you can think through smart design. So what that means is finding lighting fixtures, finding lighting sources where the LED is going to be of the right color quality, it's going to be of the right color consistency, and it's going to push light at the target where you need it, right? So all LED isn't created equal. A great example of this is LED tape. We find that there's tape on the market that you can, here in New York, you can go down to Canal Street, you can walk the electronics section, you can go ahead and buy yourself RGB tape at whatever it is, $10 a foot, get yourself a driver, plug in a DMX controller, and go. Problem with those kinds of solutions is that typically they don't last, the color is inconsistent from section to section, and they mount improperly and they don't dissipate heat well. My point being that just because it's an LED product doesn't necessarily mean it's high quality. What we're starting to see, and this is just my sort of general take on it as we see the industry evolve, is that now that the efficacy is where it needs to be, now that we've crossed the 100 lumens per watt barrier and we're moving past that, I mean, Cree announced a 300 lumen per watt concept chip a few months ago. So we're seeing that we're going even further in terms of chip level efficacy. Now the manufacturers are capable of doing some really interesting things where they're getting back to lighting quality. It's no longer about how much light you need to push out of the fixture. We've crossed those thresholds. We're now equal to halogen sources and fluorescent sources in most applications. We're getting there with metal halide and other HID sources. The difference now is, great, you can push enough light out of the fixture. Is the light quality where it needs to be? And I think if you take a look at some of these the photos in this slide here, all of the fixtures that you see on the screen right now are all LED fixtures. And this was something that, if you look in the lower right, sure, the sort of cube with a series of LED chips on the board that shot through a lens that might be, medium glare. This was something that was common in the industry. They're beautiful fixtures, but there was a certain look to them. Europeans embraced this look long before Americans did. But if you look at some of the more traditional forms, the recessed downlights in the lower left corner and the upper right corner, the satiny pendants in the upper left, these are all LED sources that are now in glare-controlled, beautiful pieces of architectural lighting that any designer could embrace. And that's where I think the industry is headed. I think that this idea of compromise between the two is just not where it used to be. I'll give you a little bit of a story. This is one that I think, it's not my story. I'm stealing it from Don Holder, but I attended a seminar he did recently where he talked about color quality and LED. And what he taught, the reason this story resonates for me is it must have been 10 years ago when he designed Thoroughly Modern Millie. I went to a lecture he did for that show where he talked about LED and color. And at that point, this was, again, probably about a decade ago, LED was only good enough to do uplighting on set pieces in terms of color quality. It needed to be that, RGB, pop and color on a set piece. Now, or today, he talked about lighting an entire show with LED. And this is somebody who's very discerning about color. This is somebody who's won multiple Tony Awards. He doesn't compromise on gear easily. But he showed us through some demonstrations lighting a piece with a traditional source 4, halogen source, and then lighting it with an LED source 4. And it was basically indistinguishable. If you hadn't told everyone that it was an LED source, no one would have known. That's how good the color quality is getting in these LED sources. It's bright enough, the color quality is good enough. The other example that he gave was he lit The Lion King, obviously, on Broadway, won a Tony for it. And one of the things about that show is the color on the dancers, the color on the set. The Lion King launched a South American tour recently, and what they found was, as they were trying to size venues, is that the venues couldn't handle the power demand of the Broadway show. So they needed to find a way to scale down the power demand of the show without compromising the design quality. And so, again, when you can play with Disney money, this gets a little easier, but they rented out a hangar, an airline hangar, this is true, and they set up a stage, and half of the rig was the traditional Broadway rig. The other half of the rig was an LED rig. And they painstakingly, over the course of, I believe, 2 or 3 months, recued the show moment by moment with an LED rig, matching color quality, matching light levels, every step of the way. Now, that kind of precision is not necessarily possible on every single show, but what drives home is the point that the color quality is possible with LED now, and it wasn't possible before. If you hadn't been matching an existing Broadway show, you could have just teched the show as normal and made the looks that you needed to make. So whether you're talking about architectural lighting, like in the slide I put up, or theatrical lighting, like a show like The Lion King, we're seeing that the color quality of LED is where it needs to be. Where we're seeing some faults in the market, and this is particularly true in the architectural market, is when it comes to glare, right? So glare control is something that we need to think about when we're trying to drive lumens out of a fixture. This is particularly true in the recessed downlighting market. So if you've got a chip that's sitting up in the housing of a fixture, but it's got to get closer and closer to the aperture to drive all the light out of the LED and maintain heat sinking, this is a glare nightmare. So the good manufacturers have figured out ways to slide the LEDs back higher in the housing, to dissipate that heat through some convectional cooling method, and keep the LED performing over time. So some of the things that you need to look for in terms of statistics or specs on a given light source. First, when it comes to brightness, not just efficacy. I talk to specifiers all the time who say, yeah, but your efficacy is not, it's like 55 lumens a watt. That's not good. I need something that's 100 lumens a watt. You might want that, and I understand why that might be important for certain applications, but what you really need to be thinking about is your target delivered lumens. So if what you're trying to do is deliver, say, 2,000 lumens to the target, if you're a 40-watt fixture at 100 lumens a watt, it's great that you're efficient, but it's too much light for the given application. So target lumens and then efficacy you have to look at those statistics together. You can't look at them separately. The other is not just color temperature and CRI. We're going to do a show about CRI versus CQS, and I got into a little bit of debate on Twitter recently about the value of CRI as a metric. But CRI is important. You want to be at least 80 plus. 90 plus is better. But with LED sources, you may find that your mileage varies on CRI. That said, color consistency from fixture to fixture. What you're going to find is good architectural lighting manufacturers publish their variation in binning. That's going to be given to you in macadam ellipses. Okay, macadam's ellipse is essentially the scale at which you are binning your LEDs, right? So that's what makes sure that 3,000 Kelvin in one bin is similar to the 3,000 Kelvin of another bin. They tell me, and I'm taking engineers' words on this, that the within 2 to 3 macadam's ellipses, the human eye cannot distinguish between if it's within that tolerance. If you go beyond 3 ellipses, typical human vision can see the difference between the two. So when you're looking at light fixtures, or you're looking at something where, especially if you're going to be lighting walls or art or anything like that, you must be within 2 macadam's ellipses so that when you buy 10 fixtures, all 10 are going to be consistent in the kind of color temperature they're delivering. When it comes to other things, durability, you want to look at warranty. You want to look at 10 years plus. When you're looking at warranty is a big one. The other one is, what was I going to say? Oh, heat dissipation. You want to make sure that there's an escape route for heat within the fixture. Troffers do this pretty well, but if you're looking at downlights or any kind of architectural piece, heat dissipation is a big one. Let me see. What were my other big points here? Kevin goes through in his piece about some of the things that are driving people a little bit crazy. One of them is prescriptive energy policy. He specifically quotes Title 24. He interviews a few lighting experts that talk about how Title 24 is driving efficiency in the market over lighting quality. I think even this is shifting. Here in New York, there are a few entities that give out rebates for energy efficiency. One of them is NYSERDA. NYSERDA is actually giving a credit now to lighting specifiers for meeting certain lighting quality standards. This includes glare, it includes glare ratio, it includes lighting ratios, it also includes things like lighting the walls, so you don't get that cave effect. Meeting IES requirements, all of the things that we associate with good lighting. There's a checklist against that, and you'll get an extra credit or an extra bonus for the specifier if you're doing a NYSERDA project and you employ lighting quality standards. I think we're going to start to see this happen more because LEED is also giving credits away for doing things like lighting the walls and creating volumetric lighting, which is important for visual comfort. So there are LEED points out there to get that, to be attained for doing that. And I think just like lighting fixtures themselves, the pendulum is swinging from pure efficiency, which is where we were in the beginning of the market. Now it's moving back toward a middle ground where lighting quality is just as important. And that's why we're having conversations about doing new LED troffers versus retrofit kits, and moving away from the idea of just spitting as much light out of a fixture as you possibly can. That was probably true in the day where you were trying to get as much light out of a fluorescent lamp or a halogen lamp as you possibly could. But today, we're not held back by those kinds of rigid standards. So I didn't want to go super long today because I wanted to make sure that I was drone on. I'm just by myself this week. But we've got some exciting shows coming up. We're going to do an experiment where we get out in the field and actually take a look at a lighting installation done by a New York design firm. We have some interviews lined up with a couple of controls experts and a couple of sustainability folks. And so I'm looking forward to the next slate of shows that we have coming up. As always, if you have questions, comments, thoughts, things that you want me to cover, feel free to tweet me at James Bedell. It's right down there in the bottom lower third there. And this is my outro, so here we go. I want to thank AV Nation for hosting me as always. The show is created in collaboration with the folks at AV Nation TV. You can find this show and a ton of others on all things integration in AV world. I am your host, JP Bedell. You can find me on Twitter at James Bedell, and you can find me at blog.stalighting.com. Thanks so much.